Okay, here we go. It is Monday, January 20th. We have a special MLK Day edition of the Early Game Podcast. There was just too much action over the weekend not to record a show this morning. We have NFL divisional round games to recap. We have several big moves in Major League Baseball free agency to recap. This is the Early Game Podcast. Listen to the show in the mornings, on your commute, whenever and wherever, so you can be a part of today's sports conversations. Let's go. Okay, let's jump right into it. So, the first game in the NFL divisional round weekend was Chiefs and Texans. Texans going to Kansas City. And this game went pretty much exactly how I thought it would go. Ultimately, I thought the Chiefs would win, and they did. But the Texans did give them a good fight. The game got off to a wild start, by the way. Opening kick return was taken by the Chiefs for 70 yards, and they fumbled it, but the Chiefs ended up recovering it. That was very exciting, but the game, frankly, stunk. Neither team looked good at all. With 1:45 left in the third quarter, there was a play that got me livid. Chiefs were up 13-12. Mahomes gets flushed out of the pocket, decides to run the ball. He's dead in the water. So he's got 3 Texans defenders coming in on him. And then he tries to juke them out because he knows what he's about to do. He's thought about this before. Hey, when I have some defenders on me, what could I do to try to come out on top? And so he jukes them out, tries to at least, and then heads right into a slide. And as he's trying to juke them out, Texans defenders are obviously going to try to go and tackle him. He's not making any sort of progress forward down the field. And so as he's sliding, they touch him. And they touch him above the head, and they get called for unnecessary roughness. What a joke. What a stupid rule. Troy Aikman was all over it on ESPN. What a dumb rule. First of all, so it's up to the refs to decide, essentially, whether that should be unnecessary roughness or not. There's no rule. It's just always been that they call when he gets touched above the head, that gets called unnecessary roughness. The refs couldn't see that he was sliding after he juked. They couldn't see that. They couldn't determine that. What's the defense supposed to do there? So quarterbacks now are just going to, and we've spoken about this, getting rid of the slide because quarterbacks weaponize the slide. They weaponize it, just like Mahomes did there. And so Patrick Mahomes essentially, I hope he's happy that he got those extra yards, the extra 15, because he's making it worse for other quarterbacks moving forward. Because they're going to have to reevaluate that rule now. So I hope you're happy, Patrick Mahomes. Oh, I was so bothered by that. Stop trying to weaponize a rule that's trying to keep you safe. He baited them. He baited the defenders to try and come and get him, and then slid and bailed himself out just so he can get an extra 15 yards. And they scored. Right? The rest was history after that. Chiefs on that drive, score a touchdown. They go up 24-15. They end up winning the game 24-15. We had the Texans plus 8.5, just couldn't cover it, which stunk. So the Chiefs are in yet another AFC Championship game. And this year they will be hosting it. Last year they were on the road. Look, on one hand, it's the Chiefs. You just feel like they're going to be able to figure it out, figure out a way to win, figure out a way to win the Super Bowl. But on the other hand, you watch this team, and you're not all that impressed. C.J. Stroud, by the way, was the better quarterback in this game. He was actually pretty impressive considering all the offensive weapons he's missing. I'll regret saying this, But Mahomes in that game looked vulnerable. I know he's so motivated to win three straight Super Bowls. But the game Saturday did not make me comfortable, even in the moment, without knowing who the opponent was going to be, declaring the Chiefs winning the AFC. I said to myself, after that game, both the Bills and the Ravens, on paper, should win this game. Now, the outside factors, going into Arrowhead, is that even what it's called anymore? Is it with Geha now? Geha? Geha? I don't know. Going into Kansas City, on the road, against Mahomes, who has done it so many times, barely only lost one AFC championship. I mean, it's absurd what Patrick Mahomes has been able to do. And last season, when we all said that he didn't have the weapons to do it, he still did it. And that's why it's so hard to say that he's going to fail this season. Because he's proven he can do it with basically nothing already. Now, this year, it's worse than it was last year. And that's just an eye test thing. Kelsey has not looked as good, even though he was solid in that game on Saturday. He had one big play where he was able to avoid a tackle and took it basically almost to the house on a routine 5-10 yard pass. But the question is this the year where Mahomes goes down? Is this the year where a team can block him from going in the Super Bowl? On the other hand, the other one seed, Lions, they hosted the Commanders after that AFC game. 1 seed Lions against the 6 seed Commanders. And my thoughts going into this game were the Lions were banged up. I did not think they'd benefit. I didn't think they'd benefit from the extra week off, frankly. With how not inexperienced. I mean, they went to the NFC Championship game last year. But I thought the Commanders were kind of the opposite, right? They got into a good rhythm down the stretch against the Bucs, and it sort of just felt like, and I mentioned this last week, it just felt like I felt better about the Commanders coming into this game based on the kind of how nice they were flowing by the end of that Bucs game. And I didn't feel the same way about the Lions. And boy, was I right. Look, let's start off with one thing. Let's just go through one thing here. The Commanders were awesome in this game. Jaden Daniels was spectacular. Give him all the credit in the world. 299 yards, threw for 2 touchdowns. And everyone, they kept saying on the broadcast, what was it? It was Brady. He kept saying, by the way, very side point, this was Brady's best game in the booth by far, as annoying as his voice is. And everyone was just saying how calm he looked. And they were right. For a rookie quarterback to look that calm on the road in what is a hostile environment in Detroit, he looked fantastic. I know it sounds cliche, but he looked calm, cool, collected. It's correct. Even though it's cliche, it's correct. And it's important. Because Jared Goff was never able to get into the same routine, the same rhythm that Jaden Daniels was able to. The first quarter was relatively quiet. Lions actually were up 7-3 going into the second. But the Commanders turned it on. They created a few turnovers, and they outscored the Lions 28-14 in the second quarter alone. And again, not taking away from Jaden Daniels, but the story here was horrible execution by the Lions. All around, they couldn't figure anything out. Their entire game plan was discombobulated. For some reason, they refused to feed Jahmyr Gibbs more often than they did. Yes, he had 14 carries, 103 yards. But he was the only thing that was working for them. When a facet of your team is working the way Jahmyr Gibbs was, you feed it to him. Instead of giving Jameson Williams a flea flicker play, which was a turnover, an interception, God, that bothered me. Give it to Gibbs. Let Gibbs cook. The offense was sloppy. Goff had 3 interceptions, and they had a fumble. So 4 turnovers overall. And the defense just didn't have the answers for the Commanders. So again, let's give the Commanders their flowers. Played fantastic. The defense was great. The offense was awesome. They came in as the 6th seed and they upset the 1 seed. Give them all the credit in the world. That being said, what a horrible ending for the Lions. It's 2 coordinators. They have 2 coordinators. Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn, both hot names for head coaching positions, and not just this year. It's not like this is the first year they're getting interviews. And Ben Johnson has been playing hard to get for years now. They looked outmatched by Commanders coaching. They looked less prepared. And they had the extra week. That's the thing that's crazy. Whether you want to say rhythm, okay, fine. Rhythm was off, yeah. But the fact that they looked so unprepared, the discombobulation, I mentioned that word before, but it just seemed like the play calling didn't match the flow of the game. And that was personified mostly by the Jameson Williams flea flicker play. It just wasn't what that moment needed. Yeah, the Lions are always they all year and through Dan Campbell's tenure, they've been known for being cute and fun. And Ben Johnson has always been very risque with his play calling. But everything just looks so forced. It's as if they came up with a script for the game last week, and there was no adjustments made to what the vibe of the game dictated. It was all just exactly what they had planned beforehand. It just seemed so off. And by the way, Jared Goff looked really bad. Really bad. There was one interception. I'm not sure which one, where it was in the game exactly, but he just overthrew a ball that he had so much time for it into triple coverage. Basically, there were 3 guys on him. He overthrew the receiver, and so no one looked good. As much as we all love Dan Campbell, his team was not ready. He can make all the motivational speeches he wants. He can go as viral as he wants. This was not about his team being injured. This was about another team being more prepared for a football game than the odds-on favorite. And the Commanders ended up winning the game 45-31. That's a win for the early game pod, by the way. I was 1-3 on the weekend. So I was 1-3. We missed covering by 1 point in the first game, Texans Chiefs. And so they're going to play in the NFC Championship game next weekend. So we have 2 teams at this point set for championship games. And that was all the action for Saturday. Now, we move on to the first game on Sunday. And this game was to decide who will host the NFC Championship game once the Commanders, as the 6th seed, moved on. And so this was the 2-seed Eagles against the 4-seed Rams. And the weather in this one played a major factor. It was cold. It was snowy. In fact, both games on Sunday were snow games. And the issue here for the Rams was that Matthew Stafford, who has played so many seasons in the NFC North, he's been known to be notoriously bad in snow games. Granted, he played in a dome in Detroit. By the way, side point, how awesome would that have been if we got Lions-Rams? Stafford Goff. Oh, would have been great. In Detroit. And so this game actually had a nice back and forth. For all the negativity around Stafford, this game had a nice back and forth. It was pretty much what I expected to be for most of the game. Jalen Hurts was unable to dominate the way I thought he was going to be unable to dominate. And he got a little banged up late in the game. But the story here, as it has been most of the season for the Eagles, was Saquon Barkley. This was another career game for the former Giants running back. 205 yards rushing. By the way, a lot of that was the 2 touchdown runs. He had one 78-yard run and one 62-yard run, so 2 touchdowns. I guess besides those 2 runs, the Rams contained it to 65 yards. But he was the story of the game. The Eagles went up 28-15 late in the fourth. The Rams made it interesting. They were down 28-22 and had the ball at the end of the game, but they just could not convert. And so again, it's not like Hurts overwhelmed the Rams. He threw for 126 yards and 0 touchdowns. 128 yards. No touchdowns. He actually rushed for 70 yards, which was surprising to me considering the concussion concerns he had, and they were playing in the snow. But this was a Saquon masterpiece. That was the point of this game. That was the story of the game. Besides for that, actually, Jake Elliott had a great clutch game down the stretch. 2 big field goals late in the fourth quarter. And to be able to hit field goals like that, one I think was from 40 yards out in the snow, was very impressive. And so, the matchup is set. We've got Commanders at Eagles for the NFC Championship. And after all that, pretty much all of the mockery of the NFC East, it's a NFC East showdown for the conference. Now, going into the season, I had said that I thought the standings in this, the result of the division would be I said Commanders, Eagles, Cowboys, Giants. And not to pat myself on the back, but we got Commanders, Eagles for the NFC Championship. And this game's going to be great. I don't think Jaden Daniels is going to be phased going into Philly. I think it was good for him to get an experience like he did this past weekend in a less hostile environment than Philadelphia. But now he's done it. He's gone on the road in a tough environment, and he's won. And he's upset the 1 seed. And now he has to go do it against the 2 seed. After he had already done it against the 3. But boy, is Jaden Daniels building up a resume very fast. And this is going to be a fun matchup. And this is the 3 o'clock game on Sunday. Okay, let's move on. So, the last game of the divisional round was the Ravens at the Bills. And this was going to be the game that we were waiting for all season. In what was, to a lot of people, an extremely disappointing NFL season with bad quarterback play for the most part and a lot of disappointing teams, a lot of uncompetitive games. This was the game where it was all going to be worth it. Prime time, divisional round. The 2 leading MVP candidates, unless you want to say Saquon is higher than one of them. Lamar Jackson against Josh Allen. For all the marbles. And look, I am obviously going to look at this game objectively. A regular football fan was just excited to get the matchup of the season. And as a Bills fan, I was nervous the Bills would not show up and they'd get blown out. Maybe that's the insecurity of being part of toxic fan bases that always think the world's going to end. The Bills are my least toxic fan base that I'm a part of. But boy, was I wrong. What a game. What a nail-biter. And let me say, a masterclass by the Buffalo Bills. Yes, they had some miscues. Yes, they should have scored a touchdown when they were first and goal late in the game and could have gone up by 2 scores. Yes, the defense sort of got bailed out by Mark Andrews. I was having flashbacks of 13 seconds left against the Chiefs. But ultimately, the Bills did what they needed to do to win the game. Down 8, Lamar Jackson marches down the field, scores a touchdown, looked great. They're down by 2 with a minute 30 left. Mark Andrews misses a wide open catch. He drops the ball, and the Bills end up winning the game. But ultimately, the Bills did what they needed to do to win the game. Josh Allen and Joe Brady called an impeccable game. And there were two main reasons why the Bills won. Again, not an X's and O's podcast. But if there were 2 reasons, it was because they did not turn the ball over. And even though Derrick Henry had a fantastic second half, they were able to contain him in the first. And when you win a football game by 2 points, you can look back and say, had we been unable to keep him at check, at bay, for the first half, we would have lost this game by 21 points. Look, I just said Jalen Hurts was sort of a non-factor for the Eagles, and therefore he was unimpressive. Jalen Hurts threw for 126 yards, Josh Allen threw for 127. Josh Allen also only had 20 rushing yards to Jalen Hurts' 70. But Josh had 2 rushing touchdowns. Again, not an X's and O's podcast. But with the naked eye, he managed the game significantly better than Jalen Hurts did. And so now, the Bills travel to Kansas City to take on the Chiefs. Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes for the 4th time in the playoffs. And Patrick Mahomes has won all 4. It's the first time since 2020 they've met in the AFC Championship game. First time since 2020 the Bills have been in the AFC Championship game. And it should be a fantastic end to this AFC playoff chase. Okay, let's finish it off with some baseball. By the way, we'll get to previews later in the week for both conference championship games. Okay. So, let's start out with the move that happened on Friday. We got rumors on Friday that the New York Mets, were heavily pursuing the top free agent in the market, Tanner Scott, and one of the top lefties in the market, AJ Minter. He's another great reliever. Ultimately, Friday, news broke they had agreed to a deal with AJ Minter, 2 years, $22 million. And with that, they add a back-end reliever, which they desperately needed. They add a lefty to match up with lefty power hitters in the NL East like Bryce Harper and Matt Olson. All good and fine with me. He's a great piece. Not a long-term commitment. I don't like with relievers. I like flexibility. I like the ability to cut ties with a reliever if they're not performing well. They did that a ton last year, and it worked out well. And David Stearns loves that, clearly. It's a good move, and it goes along with the narrative that they moved on to Plan B without Pete Alonso. Now, don't get me wrong. For all the Mets fans coming at my throat, they can't be done yet. I agree there. They still need another reliever, and they still need another bat. But wake me up on March 27th and tell me what the roster is and ask me what my opinion is of this team on opening day. Don't ask me before that. Don't ask me to go vilify this front office like some of you are when there's still 2 months left before opening day. More than 2 months left. That being said, the big news on Friday was not AJ Minter to the Mets. No, after that, we got news that Roki Sasaki had made his decision. And he's been a main topic on this show. I would say the two most recurring topics on the show are Roki Sasaki and Jimmy Butler. Early Friday, we got news that the Padres were told they were out of the running. By the way, they got freezing cold takes. I don't know if that's the right terminology. But apparently he was seen at Petco Park, and no one really ever confirmed it. But that was a few days ago, and Padres fans were getting very excited. But that meant that the finalists for Roki Sasaki were the Dodgers and the Blue Jays. If you did not think he was going to be a Dodger, you are delusional, and you were delusional. He obviously chose the Dodgers. Shocker there. They lied to you. It was always the Los Angeles Dodgers. They tried saving face for any sort of collusion claim by any of these teams, but Sasaki had his mind up the entire time. Joe Wolf told him he needs to dance for MLB teams, and so that's what he did. The rich get richer. Their rotation is absurd. Ohtani, Yamamoto, Glasnow, Snell, Kershaw, and now Sasaki. Stupidity. It is insane. Baseball's going to have to do something about these deferred payments. And again, well, let's get to that in a second. But the ability to put a rotation like this together is insane. And if it couldn't get any worse, then on Sunday, the Dodgers agreed to a deal with Tanner Scott, the best reliever on the market. So they pair him with Blake Trinan, one of the best relievers in baseball. And again, I'll use this word again. It is plain, flat-out stupidity. It's the evil Empire Yankees before they started winning every single year. I know anything can happen in baseball. And you just hope some team can figure out a way to, in the playoffs, eliminate the Dodgers. But the wild part is their payroll is $473 million. They don't care, though. Much of it's deferred. And that's what baseball needs to figure out. $473 million in deferred money. First of all, this organization is going to be a mess in 10 years from now when they try selling the team because of how much money they owe and how they're not able to field the team at the moment. They still today get taxed 100% on every dollar over $301 million, and they lose draft picks. I mean, I guess they have Yamamoto and Sasaki now for the next 10 years, more, with Sasaki at least, who will probably end up staying for longer. It's just not fun. And yeah, as a Mets fan, I'm directly, impacted by this. Because the Mets are considered one of the teams chasing the Dodgers. But when you just have that much talent, man, it is just insane. There's nowhere to hide. The lineup is absurd. The rotation is more than absurd. And the bullpen is just as more absurd as the rotation is. But I guess we'll see. We will see what teams do now. What teams make adjustments? What teams make more moves? Will the Mets make more moves? Will the Phillies, Braves, the other top teams in the NL, what are they going to do? Okay, that's a show. Tomorrow we'll have a recap of the College Football Playoff Championship between Notre Dame and Ohio State. And whatever else happens in sports today, have a wonderful day.